All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today's lesson is going to be about the immigrants who came to the United States from like the 1870s up until like the 1900s. Okay, like I said in class before, and if you weren't there for to hear this part, basically we're going to be looking at primarily the Asian Americans. We are going to talk a little bit about the European Americans at the beginning, but like I said in class, the European Americans, we've talked about them. They've been taught about up the wazoo. They have movies about them, their experiences, things like that. And you really don't hear too much about the Asian Americans and their ancestors and what happened to them and how did they establish themselves, here in this country. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, there's the objectives, analyze the importance and significance of cultural communities, examine the differences between European and Asian immigrants. You're gonna see a difference, especially the processing. That one's big. And then we're create an argument on whether nativist people have an argument to their claims. And you're gonna find out who they are and what these people believed back then. All right. Now, if you notice on your warm-up, there's actually two questions on there. Okay. The first one says, what are the four things the Asian man brings to this country? So if you look around him, you'll see four things written down. Okay. Some students picked it up like that, saw it right away, and some students had to like really like look and I guess I don't know if they just didn't see it or what. Okay. But it's there. There's four things. The second question says, according to this artist, who is allowed in this country besides this Chinaman? Because he's not allowed, as you can see from this picture. But there's a group of people. There's like five types. Now, the thing is, like I said in class, don't look for Irish or German or French. No, no, there's another type of group of people, not by ethnic group. Okay, and there's a list on here in this picture. Okay, so look for that list and write that down for number two. Okay, so go ahead, look for it, pause the video because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so immigrants from Europe came for many reasons, but the number one was jobs. A lot of them came because they heard that America was a land of opportunity and that there was jobs out here, so they can, become wealthy and have a life as opposed to how their life was back in their home country. So that's why a lot of them came. This one was pretty interesting too. What I found out, a lot of the people who came during this time were young men, young teenage boys, like your guys' age and stuff like that. Um, they left mainly because to escape military services. Okay, now student asked me, well, isn't that kind of like the draft? Yes, yes, kind of. Um, in some countries, once you reach a certain age, you have to sign up for the military. Okay, and you have to serve for so many years, 5, 10 years, things like that. So that's why a lot of these guys, teenage boys, during this time left their country because they didn't want to be part of that. And the last big one was religious persecution. One of the biggest groups that was persecuted and like I hate to use the word, but kind of like hunted down were Jewish people in Poland and in Russia. They were seen as the scapegoats for everything wrong in their country. Bad winter, blame the Jewish people. Um, the prices go up on food and things like that, blame Jewish people. So they were attacked quite a bit. So a lot of them said, you know what? I'm done with this place. I'm going to go to the United States. Okay. Now, there was a big difference between immigrants who came during this time and the ones back in the day, like the days of George Washington, things like that. Um, the thing was, back then, before you could get on the boat, they would do like a pat down on you, make sure that you did not take any gold with you. The way they saw it, that gold coins that you had belonged to Britain or France or wherever the country was. They didn't want you taking anything valuable, especially gold, silver, and things like that, to America. Leave that here. But now at this time in the 1800s, late 1800s, should I say, they kind of like, yeah, go ahead, take your money, you know. And there was old laws that were set back in the day where, like, if you were a skilled worker, you were great at putting furniture together. You were like really smart with the, how to do numbers, accounting, things like that. They were like, no, no, you stay here. You're valuable, And then peasants, they had to ask for permission to leave. And even peasants who owed money, they had to ask permission to leave. You couldn't leave if you owed money and you got to pay that debt off and things like that. So how long was the trip? About 2 weeks. So imagine being on a boat going this way, this way, this way, back and forth, for 2 weeks. A lot of people got sick, all right, not just from the seasickness, but also because they were in the steerage, which is the bottom of the boat. So people were there, they were cramped, and so somebody got sick or somebody was sick, then everyone else was going to get sick during that 2 week time. And like I said, going rocking back and forth, some people get seasick. And so some people might have bleh on the floor. The restrooms, there was many. And there were, I don't know if this is completely 100% true, but it sounds legit, if you really think about back in the day. Um, I read this one uh, book that said that they had buckets for you to go to the restroom in. And again, boats going back and forth, if that bucket got filled and no one tossed it out, you can just imagine what spilled out. And if you look at this picture right there, you see a little girl on the ground like she fell. So chances are that girl had like vomit, pee, poop all up on her shoulder. Okay. And so when the people actually made it to America and were allowed out, um, they didn't clean the bottom of the boat. They didn't like hose it down or anything like that. No. So it wasn't the cleanest area. Okay. Now, immigrants from Europe went to Ellis Island. If you've seen the movie The Godfather Part 2, they did a phenomenal job showing you how the immigrants came, they were on the boat, they saw the Statue of Liberty, they were processed, asked what's your name, where you from, things like that. And then they were checked to see if they had any diseases, lice, things like that. If they were sick or if they had some type of disease, they were quarantined on Ellis Island until they got better. Uh, but those who were okay, they were fine, they're given the green light, they were let go. So it took about a day to process them. Okay. Now, once they were released, a lot of immigrants went to large towns. They went to New York, Chicago. Here's something interesting. Milwaukee and Detroit were basically seen as like LA. How we see LA nowadays, like the big cities. That's how it was Milwaukee and Detroit. They were seen as a big city. And a lot of ethnic groups kind of coagulated. They formed in different parts of the city and they basically carved out their own little part. So, uh, if you've ever been to New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, you might have come across an area called Little Chinatown, Little Tokyo, Little Italy, Little Tijuana, because all those places, um, the ethnic group of people live there and they want to feel like a part of home is there. So they can speak in their native tongue, you know, they can write in their native language. They could recreate their churches. Now, on there, you see clubs. And I'm not talking about dance clubs and things like that. No, no, no. If you have ever heard the song Yankee Doodle, right? If you ever wonder at the very end, it says, he stuck a feather in his hat and he called it macaroni. You ever wonder why he called it macaroni? Right? The thing was, the macaroni was a club. It was a bunch of guys talking about fashion, the newest hats to wear, clothing, drapes, the pants, shoes. That's what they did. So That's the kind of clubs they had back then, whether it's sports clubs or social clubs. That's what it was. It wasn't like a club with the music and things like that. Okay, now let's get into Asia. All right, so let's first talk about China. China, there was a lot of reasons why people left. So number one though was the population. The population was huge in China back in the 1880s. Uh, was about 430 million people. Right now, today, they have about like 1.5 billion people. Just to give you a perspective, as of last week, because I checked this online, there are 331 million people in America. We still haven't reached what China was back in the 1880s. So, yeah. Okay. But because they had so many people, unemployment was high, poverty was high. Okay. And there was famine. People, there was not enough food to feed people. Okay. So things were pretty bad. The next thing why people left, big one, the gold rush. There's especially a lot of poor people who couldn't find a job who were like, you know what? Might as well try my chances in America. Go to San Francisco and try to find gold. And there were stories and legends of how there's gold just in the stream of water. You could just pick it off. Or there was gold just sticking out of the mountains and you just had to get your pick and just dig it out. You know, so there was a lot of myths. Okay, but sad to say, not everyone who came made a fortune. Not everyone who came actually found gold. If they did, it was very little. Okay. The next was the Taiping Rebellion. This is a rebellion that happened, um, and it basically encompassed a large part of the country, and just people were just like sick of the fighting and stuff. We're just like, you know what, it's gone. Now, once these Chinese people came to America, there was only one job that they could get where there was no discrimination, and that was the railroad. Basically, the railroad was the only place where they didn't care who you were. They said, yeah, come on. We'll hire you. Come on over. Okay. But other jobs, even some stores, refused and discriminated against Chinese people. They would tell them, we don't do business with your kind. We don't want you here. Things like that. So they looked down on the Chinese people. Now, instead of being like, oh, damn, man, we don't get a chance. No one gives us a chance, and how are we going to live and things like that. No, no. Instead of that, you know what they did? They made their own stores. This grocery store won't let us go there. Fine, we'll make our own. This laundromat won't let us wash our clothes. Fine, we'll make our own. You know, so they created their own businesses, and there are instances from what I've read in my research that even though some people didn't like them shopping in their place, some people actually shopped. So, like, white people would go to the Chinese place because the Chinese place, their stuff was cheaper. Yeah. People are maybe racist and discriminating this and that, but when it comes to their pocketbook, they'll look the other way for that. Because saving a buck, hey, a buck's a buck. All right, so here's the thing, too. Japanese people, starting off, they were in the minority. There wasn't that many coming compared to the Chinese, the people from like Laos, Mongolia, the Philippines, things like that. The Japanese were actually the minority. But by 1900, they had become the majority. And on the next slide, you're going to see why. And the thing is, these guys came and they were ready to work. They brought business, mentality. They were ready to start. Okay. Now, from the 1800s up until the 1910s, um, their processing area was at the wharf in San Francisco. Okay. Now, if those guys who've been to San Francisco, if you've ever seen Fisherman's Wharf, you have a good idea what I'm talking about. You have an idea what that area looks like. Okay, so imagine this two-story shed there, and this is where the people will come in, they'd be processed and things like that, and it could fit 500 people. Okay, but here's the problem: there were more and more people coming. So what they did is in 1910 they switched it from uh, the wharf to Angel Island. Okay, and this is where they basically said, okay, this is the processing area. Problem was they really took their time. A lot of teenage boys, you know, and early 20s. It took months for their paperwork to be processed. They would be told, hey, sorry, your paperwork got lost. You have to fill out this another form again, this and that. Oh, we can't read your handwriting, or I mean, whatever excuse they could think of, just constantly, the paperwork's gone, can't find it, we can't process you correctly. We need verification, la la la. So we need this, just all kinds of stuff. Okay, these guys were waiting there for so long. They actually started like writing poetry on the walls, which thing is you can still see to this day. You know, um, yeah. From my understanding, if you can't really see it, you can't read it, things like that. There's books that made of it, translated things like that to what it says. All right, so here's the thing. I told you guys that how the Japanese became the majority because there was this law that was passed called the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. What it did, it barred the Chinese from coming into this country for 10 years. So imagine these guys coming on a boat for like a month, like almost a month and a half, depending, and basically told, nope, you got to go back. Yeah, you're all Chinese people. Nope, you're not allowed here. Go back. You know. And also, those Chinese people who were here as citizens, they were now considered not citizens. They were deemed you can't be a citizen now. Now, Chinese people were like, well, why us? Why are you attacking us for? And they were told, well, there's too many of you guys coming over. Yeah, see, there's way too many immigrants coming over, and yeah, you guys are just, yeah, so that's why we're doing it. And they argue, saying, well, what about the Italians, the Germans, the Irish? Why are you not attacking them? There's more of them coming to this country than us. Well, here's the thing, they're good people. They're starting to become good Americans. You guys, oh, just there's just too many of you guys, and yeah. So the Chinese people then petitioned the president to try to step in and stop this law from happening, but the president was like, well, kind of stepped around it, didn't want to get involved, things like that. So what they did was a lot of these Chinese people, they filed a lawsuit against the government, which is something you can do as a citizen. But here's the thing. According to this, they're not citizens. So if you're not a citizen of this country, you cannot sue the government. All right. Now, 1892 comes. The 10 years is basically over, and Congress renews the Exclusion Act. So then 1902 comes, and in Congress, they're like, well, are we going to do this every 10 years? So they decided to make it permanent. Okay. And in 10 years, the Chinese population dropped by 30%. All right. Now, if it's permanent, does that mean Chinese people are not citizens of this country? No. See, what happened was in 1943, the United States was involved with World War II. Okay. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Right. And the thing is, Japan and China, they didn't like each other back then. Like, they really didn't like each other. So the United States is like, hey, China, let us help us out here, you know. And China was like, oh, why? You don't like us. And there are people, people who've been living there, who are related to us. that you don't even consider them citizens. You don't even see them as equals. So why should we help you guys out? So Congress decided to act and they repealed the act in 1943. So sad to say, there are some Asian Americans who are in this country who are like 90 some years old who've only been a citizen for 80 years. Yeah. So it wasn't that long ago, guys, that this type of thing happened. Now, there's a thing called the nativist movement. Nativism is basically people who believe that new immigrants were being a drain to this country, whereas the old immigrants were good for our country. All right, so they particularly aimed at Asian, Jewish, Latin, and Eastern Europe people, but they favored British and French and German and things like that. Um, so again, they felt that those guys were perfect for our country, whereas the old ones or the new ones were just a burden, you know. Um, Now, if you look at this map really quickly, if you notice on this part where it says where it's Europe, if you look at the number up on top, 7 million people, old immigrants, the ones they like. And if you look at Canadians, Latin, the Eastern, the number from Europe that's on the bottom, and the Asians, you put them all together, you will not equal the number of the old immigrants, the quote unquote old immigrants. And then they complained that, oh my God, there's so many of these Asian and Jewish and Latin and, yeah, Middle Eastern people coming into this country. Oh, but in reality, it's like, no, there's twice as many old immigrants who are coming, not the new ones. But they complained about the new ones. So in their arguments, they would say, you know, the old immigrants, they brought their money. They weren't all poor. They came with valuable things. Whereas the new immigrants, they saw them as, oh, look at these guys are all like broke. They have nothing. They're just a drainage in our system, and all they want is a handout from everyone else. Ugh, you know, that's their thing. They also said, when it comes to education, well, the old immigrants, at least they could read English. Oh my goodness, and it's so easy to talk to them and you can have a conversation with them. And they would say about the new immigrants, oh, they can't even read English. They provide nothing. They're not that smart. And it's like, well, the old immigrants from England should know English. To ask a Chinese person to know English, no, that's not what they speak over there. But again, that shows you the mentality and the stupidity of those people. Okay. Next one, the adjustment of culture. They felt like, oh, well, these guys, these old immigrants from England, France, and stuff like that, they can easily understand our culture, our holidays, and things like that. And then we look at new immigrants as like saying, look, they have different customs, different um, holidays and stuff like that. Like Chinese New Year's. What's that? No, there's only one New Year's. And see, these guys are just trying to push their stuff onto us. When it came to the previous countries, oh, well, these old uh, immigrants come from democratic countries where people vote and they understand the importance of voting. And they would look at new immigrants and go, and see, these guys, they come from countries where they have kings and queens and emperors and they have to bow down and things like that. And it's like, England has kings and queens, right? Just saying. They're not all democratic and stuff like that. And then we came religion. The nativist people will say, these old immigrants are Protestant, good Christian people. And the new immigrants, they're Catholic, they're Jewish, they're Orthodox, they're not like us. They worship a different religion, and so yeah, they're wrong. All right. Now here's the thing: some of you guys may have heard these arguments and been like, some people today still say this stuff. Exactly. There are still people to this day who spew the same stuff that was said back in the 1880s, 1890s, and they're completely wrong. All right, so here's my question to you. Why do you think Asian American people's history isn't told as much as the European counterparts? Why do you think there's so many movies about the Italians and the British and French and the Germans, the Scottish, the Irish, but you really don't hear anything about the Asian American stories, come from China, Japan, Mongolia and Laos and things like that. Why do you think their story's not told? What do you think? What are some possibilities you think of? Okay, so write your response. Okay, once you're done with this, you are done with this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Okay, with that being said, guys, take care. You be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.